Action, former Office and Budget and Management Director and President of the Center for Renewing America, Russ Vought. All right, Russ, we do see this inflation. We see it almost in every nook and cranny of our lives, not just in the supermarket anymore. A large part of this, though, is the federal government. I mean, they're fueling this thing. We've put out trillions of dollars in stimmy checks, trillions of dollars in unemployment benefits. So what's going to happen? I mean, how far does this go up and how much of it is self-created?
I think a lot of it is self-created, and I think that's the scary part about it, Charles, is that we really don't know, given the Biden administration's intent to go forward with another $4 trillion in spending, where this might lead. And I think that Secretary Yellen's comments today or yesterday regarding the interest rates may need to be going up gives you a sense of their ideological commitment to go forward with their agenda and not take a real-world approach to the market.
So, but what do you think changed, though? Like, in other words, she went off, it felt like she went off script, but I can't believe it's an accident, right? She was Fed chair. She knows this game very well. They understand, the market's going to hang on every single word that comes out of their mouths. So, do you think they really see, like, wow, this is going to be gargantuan? But to your point, we are not going to change no matter what, no matter how destructive the policies are to our pockets, after inflation. They're going to stay the course.
I do think it was a mistake on her part, but I think it reveals their thinking behind closed doors and saying the quiet part out loud. And I think the reality is that the left and this administration is going with the ideologues within the Democrat Party on everything. You just saw that in the refugee cap decision, and so you're going to see it in these efforts to have a cradle-to-grave government on and on. And I think what it shows is that they are prepared for a little bit of inflation because it acts as a hidden tax that they can get away with, because it's not along the lines of what the president promised with his $400,000 and below.
But, Russ, we did a segment last week on presidential elections that were lost on inflation. And it's a hell of a gamble that they're taking because, you give people free money, that's one thing. But when they spend it all in, 2 bags of groceries, that's another.
They are, but it requires a little bit of historical memory to get us back to the 70s and beyond. And I think too many of our policy elites are looking at the last 10 years where there were some anomalies that caused it not to have inflation, even though we had incredible amounts of government spending. And largely, we're looking at 2% growth at the time. And so the Fed could pay interest on the reserves to keep the money supply from being a problem and creating inflation. And when we're coming out of a pandemic, I worry that we're going to be able to see that same kind of historical precedent. And I think you're right from last week to say we're looking at something along the lines of what we saw in the 70s with stagflation.
On that same note, and in the same conversation, I spoke to the Kansas Chamber yesterday, and I mean, you had all kinds of an assortment of businesses across the board, all frustrated. They cannot get people to work. People refuse to work. They are making too much money from all of the largesse from this government, and to your point, may get even more. How damaging could this be? Because this seems to be a golden opportunity. We've got a hell of a runway. We came out of last year with momentum, but could this hurt the recovery longer term if people don't return to work?
I think a lot of things could hurt the recovery, and one of them is the unemployment benefits that making it so it's so hard to get people to come back to work, where you have to say, hey, here's $50 to come in for an interview. And so, my concern about that particular proposal, that provision in law, is that it just keeps getting extended. And so every time we all know it's bad policy, and then we get up to it, and the political class just keeps extending it because they don't have the will to do it. And yet it has real-world consequences for making sure that we, instead of having 6% growth, we have more to get out of where we are.
Yeah, I tell you, Russ, it's a dangerous path we're going on. We've all seen it in the past, but to your point, some call it buying votes. We'll see what happens. Great to have your expertise on this, Russ. We'll talk to you again real soon.
Thanks, Charles.
Well, folks,